These are our oceans. They sustain life to all organisms on the planet, but they are falling victim to an ongoing anthropogenic repercussion, plastic pollution. As an expanding species with a growing population, we are becoming more reliant on the use of plastics. More plastic has been produced in the last 10 years than the whole of the last century. In the UK, more than 275,000 tonnes of plastic are used each year, with only 24% being recycled. And looking at our daily lives, we can see that almost every aspect is contributing to plastic usage. In local supermarkets, it is not hard to see that a large proportion of the products have plastic wrapping, and although reusable bags are available, the use of plastic ones is still predominantly higher. To learn how plastic is affecting the ocean, we must first follow its pattern from being an item being used to a small part of a large problem. When plastics are thrown away instead of recycled, they can easily fall into local rivers or streams, but will most likely find itself into the ocean by way of a storm drain or sewers. This can add up a lot of waste within urbanised areas, as there is a higher population and density. Storm drains and sewers will lead to the ocean, and plastics account for around 10% of total weight generated, although 90% of waste in the ocean is made up of plastics, showing that they do not biodegrade very quickly. Some of the waste will build up on beaches and landfills, but most of it will end up in the ocean and eventually be swept into the gyres. The biggest one of these being the North Pacific Gyre, which is home to the infamous Great Pacific Garbage Patch, a large amount of plastic floating within the circle. Another contributor to the waste in the ocean are fishing and sailboats. Although it became illegal in 1988 to dump rubbish into the ocean, fishing nets, drift nets and other gear are commonly found still floating in the ocean and are known for trapping many sea animals. Microplastics known as nurdles are tiny plastic particles that are used to create a larger polymer-based product. And although they range from microscopic to 15mm, they are the biggest threat to the ocean life out of all other plastics. Due to their tiny size, it is very common for nurdles to escape factories and transportation vehicles, and they can pretty much end up anywhere. Because they are produced in several different countries and then shipped across the ocean, it is very common for them to be accidentally dumped directly into the ocean. Once the nurdles begin to accumulate, it can be devastating for marine life. They have a high endurance and can last for generations. When studying the beaches of Hawaii, it was found that 72% of all particles sized between 1mm and 15mm were in fact nurdles. It is not only the waste that is currently being thrown into the ocean that is a problem. Plastics can last between 500 and 1,000 years, and people still litter unaware of the problems that it can cause in the ocean, meaning that over the 80 years, a large lump of eternal waste has been created.
We just have to look around us today to see the plastic waste that is around us. Landfill sites are quickly filling up, and there isn't a town centre in England without at least one piece of plastic wedged behind a corner or stuffed in a crevice. We've already seen how plastic enters the ocean and what happens there, but what effect does this have on wildlife and on us? When we think of plastic debris, we tend to think of macroplastics, and these are the ones we can see to have an immediate effect. Plastic netting and rings can usually trap ocean mammals, making swimming difficult and eventually causing them to drown. Ingestion of large plastics can also damage the stomachs of animals and cause a slow death by starvation. In a recent study on the analysis of stomach contents of seabirds, it was found that 111 out of 312 species of bird had ingested plastic, while in some populations up to 80% of all individuals had evidence of plastic in their stomach. Even if it isn't ingested or snagged, drifting plastics can act as a raft for invasive species to cross oceans and cause damage and devastate local ecosystems. Nanoplastics are another hazard. Small and trapped in ocean gyres and currents, they can remain in the ocean for years, accumulating into massive amounts. Whilst the problem of nanoplastics is still debated on, we can already see evidence that it is entering the food chain in filter feeders, and input of foreign material at a low trophic level can be devastating for all the organisms that rely on the individual as the plastic travels down the food chain and accumulates. Nanoplastics are another hazard. Small and trapped in ocean gyres and currents, they can remain in the ocean for years, accumulating into massive amounts. Whilst the problem of nanoplastics is still debated on, we can already see evidence of them entering the food chain in filter feeders, and input of foreign material at a lower trophic level can be devastating for all the organisms that rely on that individual as the plastic travels through the food chain and accumulates. What does this all mean for us? Aside from losing the aesthetically pleasing nature of the ocean and charismatic creatures such as sea turtles, birds and dolphins, The effects of ocean debris can have a direct impact on our own lives too. People living on the coast will see the debris of plastics washing up on the shore, and this can damage tourism-based economies in places such as Indonesia and the Caribbean, which rely on their pristine beaches. It can also play a direct role in fishery-based economies as well. Both subsistence and commercial fishing can be impacted by plastics. As we have seen before, macroplastics can choke sea animals, which can clog up the nets. And plastic itself can also stop the nets from catching fish, either by clogging up or tearing the net. In fact, the economic cost of poor ocean management equates to $200 billion per year, a number that is constantly on the increase. Predictions of this figure increasing by $322 billion a year by 2050 are slowly becoming a reality, and that is not including the incalculable cost to both fishing and tourism-based economies that are affected by ever-increasing amounts of plastic in the ocean. The clean-up cost will cost everyday people thousands in taxes, and so we ask, can anything be done sooner, now, for cheaper?
When we think of combating problems caused by plastic, one of the first things that springs to mind is recycling. As the general public's environmental awareness has increased, so has their willingness to contribute to the recycling scheme. However, there are still plastics ending up in the ocean, and we have several decades to make up for in cleanup. The UK's rate of recycling was in 2012 at 17%. In Norway, the rate of curbside plastic recycling was at 34% in 2003 and had increased to 64% in 2014. The recycling of plastic can be time-consuming because it has to be separated depending on what polymers they are made up of. And this is where the public neglects the recycling scheme, and litter that was supposed to go to a landfill or recycling stations ends up in the bin for general waste. Many volunteering organisations and NGOs have gotten involved trying to raise awareness about the problem. UNEP is one such organisation, and as a result of their campaign, the International Coastal Cleanup arose. 500,000 people from 100 different countries across the world participated in 2009 to tackle the problem at a local level. Legislations are also trying to combat the problem of ocean plastic pollution. Oslo Convention is one such piece, and it binds the contracting parties to protect the North East Atlantic and makes it compulsory for them to survey the ocean for marine litter 3 to 4 times a year. The science behind combating plastic pollution is new and still developing. The problem of nanoplastic has recently been discovered in the last decade or so, and funding for research is still scarce. Several attempts have been made to develop microbial bacteria or fungi to break down plastics, but due to the large size of polymers, it cannot diffuse through a bacterial cell wall, and several steps of breakdown is necessary. This makes the breakdown of even the smallest pieces of plastic a time-consuming process, even in the right environment. Researchers are trying to accelerate the breakdown by manipulating abiotic factors such as temperature, as well as the organism's hereditary traits. Another option is biodegradable plastics, which have been worked on for quite some time. With increasing awareness of the problem, it is likely that this kind of product, without compete, is less environmentally predecessor, but a viable prototype is yet to be released. A new project called the Ocean Cleanup was started last year by 19-year-old Boyne Slack. Their slogan is, "Why move through the oceans if the oceans can move through us?" They are in the startup phase of building a self-sustained vessel that will be anchored to the seabed within the ocean gyres and move through the currents to collect plastic debris. To avoid putting marine animals in harm's way of entanglement, the vessel will have solid floating barriers collecting the debris. After collection, the plastic will be harvested and recycled. The project is likely to make a profit of the recycled products, as the collection of 1 kilogram of plastic only costs €4.5. This will also save countries with a coastline a substantial amount of money in repairs of fishing vessels and gears damaged by plastic. It will also cover cleanup costs, which are estimated to be $1,500 to $25,000 per year per tonne for all of the world's beaches.
As we can see, plastic pollution is now a problem and it will continue to grow.
Technologies are developing to combat this, but we need to act now to prevent this problem from continuing.
If we don't act soon, we could be facing millions of clean-up costs and be the witness to irreparable damage to our oceans and their inhabitants.